Hey, listeners, so excited for today's podcast. We are speaking with Adam Weinger from Double the Donation. And today we're going to talk about all things company matching. Adam, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Before we dive into your business and just the company match landscape, tell us about yourself, who you are, and what got you started in this career.
Absolutely. So I'm Adam. I live in Atlanta, where I went to college at Emory. And I stumbled into corporate matching. After college, I had my first job at Capital One, and I was making different donations to different nonprofits. I was volunteering as a Big Brother in the Big Brother, Big Sister organization. And one day, about 18 months into my job, a colleague said, "Hey, Adam, do you think Capital One will match? Or did you know that Capital One will match that gift?" And it was the first I really heard about it. And it kind of set me down this path to talking to different nonprofits about employee matching gift programs, what they were doing, what the opportunity was. And now, fast forward 8 or 9 years, here we are.
So basically, you had learned that your company would match your donation, and you had that moment of, I'm sure there's other corporations that would match. And so you started your business. So tell us more about your company and the services you guys provide.
Yeah, so when I made my different donations and I first heard about the company's matching gift program, I printed off the paper form, didn't know what to do with it. It sat on my desk at the office, and eventually, I threw it away. I'm a little embarrassed to admit it. I didn't know what to do with it. No one followed up with me about it. And 2 months went by, and I said, okay, I'm not going to worry about this. So at Double the Donation, we try to solve some of those challenges. So, how can you raise awareness among donors? How can you inform them of what the company's process is? How can you help donors submit matches? And we build and sell software to nonprofits to help them promote matching gifts and ultimately bring in more money from those programs.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. I saw on your guys' website that anywhere between $4 to $7 billion is left on the table from corporate matches. Talk to us about that and how do we fix that problem, because that is a massive problem, especially in times like now where nonprofits are so under resourced as a result of the economy. So how can we take that money off the table?
Yeah, it's a staggering amount, and it's spread out across thousands of companies, everywhere from the 65% of Fortune 500 companies that have employee matching gift programs to 50, 100-person companies that have them. And there's challenges across the board. Donors have no idea if their company has a program. Nonprofits don't know which companies have them. Companies only mention it once per year or on page 37 of an employee benefit book. Nonprofits don't have anyone who owns matching gifts at the organization. So all those things kind of come together. And what you see is only a small percentage of donors who work for a company with a matching gift program know about it and ultimately go and submit their match. So the key is kind of tackling all of those different barriers.
That makes total sense. And obviously at Fundraise, we're big fans of the business as a partner. We've leveraged your guys' technology into our giving experience. So when donors give, it's a field on the giving form where they can essentially look up to see if their company has a matching policy or program. And we've seen pretty good conversion. But on top of that, even if Fundraise didn't put that in the field and we were partnered, you would still get access to whether or not your company matches. So how does the process typically work when an individual puts in their business name, Google, for example, and what happens after the donation is complete? How does the process kick off?
Yeah, so the key is really solving the challenges around identifying which donors are matching gift eligible, knowing where those donors need to go to submit their match, and kind of helping them get there so that way they can spend the 30 seconds that they need to tell Google, hey, I made a gift of $500. It should be match eligible. I'd like you to match it. So as someone's going through the donation process, and you mentioned it, there's a field on the donation form where you ask the donor to see if their company will match their gift. So it pulls from our database. We have thousands of companies in our database representing somewhere between 15 and 19 million individuals in the workforce who work for a company with a matching gift program. So we identify where they work, and then immediately after the donation, we're able to provide them and say, hey, Joe, hey, Sally, did you know Google has a matching gift program? This $500 gift can be doubled. Here's where you need to go. Here's the information that you need. Please spend the 30 seconds. So you start working and solving that identification, informing donors, following up with donors, tracking if they've submitted it. and you start to tap into some of that $4 to $7 billion.
Got it. That makes sense. So, how big is the market, right? We know how much is being left on the table. How big is this market when it comes to corporate matches?
Yeah, so today I would say somewhere between $1 to $3 billion every year is being submitted by donors to their company and getting matched. So you're kind of looking at around 20% of donors who are eligible are submitting their matches. We've kind of looked at different organizations of different sizes, universities, and you see some of the larger peer-to-peer organizations raising a couple $1 million, and K through 12 schools raising, $30,000, $40,000.
So, 20% are matching. Is it because the remaining 80% just don't know that their companies match, or is that the primary driver, would you say?
I think there's two primary drivers. One, that donors have no idea. So if you work for Google or you work for Home Depot, the only times that you really hear about the company's matching gift program is the day you start, when you get the 80-page benefit book. And matching gifts are a little paragraph on page 37. And maybe if you're lucky, the company sends out one email about it over the course of the year because they have so many business related updates to send out to their team members. So there's kind of that lack of awareness, which is something that I personally experienced when I was at Capital One, in that my first 18 months, I didn't even know the company had a program. And then once I found out about it, no one really followed up with me. I didn't know how to submit my match, and therefore I didn't. So you're seeing that across all sorts of donors for pretty much every company.
Right before this interview, I was looking at our own data to see what corporations are leading the way across our customer base, and I was kind of surprised. I actually saw Walt Disney was one of the leading corporations, followed by Google. I thought Google would be number one because they have a pretty rich matching program. Is it generally the larger corporations that are making up most of that 1 to 3 billion, or is it spread out across the industry?
So you definitely have the larger corporations that employ a lot of folks. So you think
Yeah,
about Home Depot, they employ 100 or 200,000 individuals, probably the same with Disney. Google employs a lot. So I do believe, and we did some research into this, I believe it was like 70% of the opportunity was coming from the top 500 companies in our database. And then, of course, you have the smaller companies that employ 100 individuals where they still have challenges with promoting matches.
got it. So we talked a little bit about how kind of fundraise and your business integrate. If nonprofit is working directly with you, talk to us about what that looks like and what sort of product is offered when they're working directly with your company.
Yeah. So at the core of what we do is we build and maintain a database of companies that match donations. And then we help organizations raise awareness and promote those matches to their donors. So if an organization works directly with us, they have access to our database of companies that have programs, the forms, the guidelines, the instructions, eligibility criteria, minimums, maximums. So if you think about Disney, they have a minimum match of $25, but they'll match up to $25,000 per an employee per year. And they
Wow.
match gifts from full-time, part-time employees. So there's kind of a lot there and a lot of an opportunity. So organizations who work directly with us kind of get access to that information. And then most of our clients work with a partner like Fundraise, where we have a really awesome integration where that information is being able to be presented during the donation process and followed up on.
I can definitely speak to when we are demoing fundraise, company match is definitely one of those things that catches individuals' attention very quickly. Just like you said, there's usually no one dedicated to it, and the person maybe that is taking point on it, it's such an incredibly manual process that it almost doesn't even feel like it's worth it to them. And so when we get to this portion of our demo talking about it's integrated into payments, it's just a light bulb moment for a lot of fundraisers.
Yeah, I mean, the Fundraise experience is a really elegant one. You guys did a great job. Your team did a great job of integrating our tools into the Fundraise donation process.
So tell us about, if you can, if there's a particular case study or customer that you can share that's really taken this as a serious fundraising channel. I think a lot of times nonprofits think about this more as like a passive. It should kind of just be treated passive, and therefore, the return isn't going to be as great if there's not a real strategy behind it. So, is there a customer or example that you can share that really illustrates the more you invest in this channel, the more return you will see?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's oftentimes a very passive source of fundraising for most organizations. And I get it, right? Their matching gifts are not as sexy as hosting a new fundraising event or a night out somewhere. When I think about organizations, we've got a lot of good examples. One that really stands out to me is the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. So we started working with them a little bit over 3 years ago. So they have 56 different chapters scattered across the US. And at the time, they were bringing in about $3.5 million per year in matching gift revenue. They actually went on and hired a consultant to evaluate what was preventing them from raising more and really discovered it was localized in each of their 56 chapters. Nobody owned matching gifts. They didn't know where any of their donors worked. They didn't have anyone following up. Kind of the only thing that was done was hopefully kind of verifying the matches and receiving the funds.
Hmm.
So they put a pretty big project into place. They have a lot of large peer-to-peer fundraising events, and they put a robust strategy around how can we identify which donors are matching gift eligible during the donation process, and then how do we follow up with those donors. So they centralized all of the matching gift efforts into a national office. They figured out kind of some business rules. So which donors should they follow up with personally versus which should they let our system kind of automatically drive to completion. And ultimately, over 2.5 years, they grew from $3.5 million to about $7.3 million in matching gift revenue.
Wow. Which is larger than about 90% of nonprofit budgets.
Yeah.
So that's pretty impressive. So the more effort you put into it, obviously, the more you're going to get out of it. What would be the reason why someone maybe does personal follow up versus letting the system kind of complete the process? Is it just because it's typically a major donor, more hand holding, or what would be some of the reasons why you would approach a more manual process versus automated?
Yeah, so I think most organizations do want to have a personalized touch for their major gift donors.
Yeah.
So within our system, we do have some rules and criteria that an organization can set up that says if the gift is more than $5,000, maybe don't do anything automated, right? You don't want to reach out to someone who just gave $1 million to your organization with
Yeah.
any type of automated email. So there's definitely that component. And then there's a component where, even if we provide the donor with exactly what they need and we take them where they need to go, ultimately they have to kind of hit submit because
Yeah.
it is an employee benefit. And not everyone does it. So LLS, the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, has some business rules where they say, let's follow up with every opportunity that represents more than, say, $1,000.
Okay.
Let's pick up the phone and call those donors, thank
Yeah.
them for their original gift, and see what they can do to help kind of push that forward.
Got it. Yeah, makes total sense. So I'm curious to know about sort of the impact COVID has had on corporate matching. As corporations are, and as we've seen, looking for areas to cut, have they cut back on their matching dollars, or has that been largely unimpacted by COVID?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to watch. And I think we've actually seen kind of both sides of things
Okay.
occurring. You have some industries that are really hurting. Take the airline industry in a very tough position. So, what we have seen is those companies cutting back on their matching gift program. And then you have other companies that are doing fairly well. Take technology as an example. So you've seen companies like Google and Apple increasing their limits or increasing their ratios. You've seen some companies rolling out new programs. So I believe I just heard that Comcast, another Fortune 500 company, just rolled out a permanent employee matching gift program, which they had tested right when COVID hit.
Okay.
So overall, when we look across our database representing employers and employees that could get their gifts matched has actually grown over the last 6 months by a little bit.
Oh wow, that's very encouraging. As I was thinking, it could be a good strategy for organizations maybe who are losing revenue in other areas to look through their donor database to figure out where those donors work and to see if those gifts are eligible. So, is there a time frame on when a gift could be matched? Like, I mean, is it within the year, or are there some other time frame rules that apply to matching?
Yeah, so I would say there's kind of a couple common rules. One is within X amount of time, the most
Okay.
common being either 6 months or 12 months.
Okay.
And then the other one that's really common is either by the end of the calendar year or by, say, 30 or 60 days after the end of the calendar year. So some companies will say you have until February 15th to submit your match from 2020, but they're actually, pretty generous periods of time.
Yeah, that's definitely allows organizations to think through, even as you're thinking about your year-end fundraising strategy, why not, as part of your segmentation, reach out to donors that you haven't received matching donor donations from, but are eligible. Mine as well. I mean, if there's one thing we learned from LLS, it's you can double your matching donations if you just put a little effort into it.
Yeah, we've actually seen a lot of organizations kind of double down on matching, especially organizations who had a peer to peer component
Okay.
or which relied on in person fundraising.
Yeah.
So we've heard from some of those organizations that they've actually kind of allocated some staff time towards matching gifts to kind of replace the time that was going towards in-person events. So when those events were getting canceled, kind of giving the list of the top opportunities to different staff members in different markets to kind of follow up and pursue those opportunities where appropriate.
Got it. Another fascinating stat I found on your guys' site, you talked about how matching gifts actually increase the mention of matching gifts, increase the original size of the donor's donation. What's the logic there? Is it more for my money type of thing? Or what else are you seeing in the data that leads you to see this?
Yeah, I think one of the things that most donors do when they give is that they care about a cause. So
Yeah.
the ability to make their gift go even further, they're able to make an even bigger impact. So you've seen a lot of studies out there where there have been multiple forms of solicitations going out where it's an appeal for a donation versus an appeal with a matching component that indicates that having a match represents a bigger opportunity to kind of bring up that average dollar amount. So we've had some of our larger clients as well run different A/B tests by incorporating our tools into their donation forms. And I've just seen when a donor realizes that their company will match their gift, that the conversion rate from that moment to the donation submission is higher and the
Hmm.
average gift amount is higher.
Very interesting. Yeah, because we've spoken to a lot of organizations who don't like it on the giving form because they feel like it's actually going to decrease conversion because it's more friction. But the research you guys have done is showing the opposite, where the experience actually isn't adding more friction; it's actually motivating, incentivizing the donor to complete the donation because more money will go to the cause.
I think it's a common question from
Yeah,
organizations. I think there's this kind of natural default towards remove and strip away every possible field. I think there's a lot of validity behind kind of making for a very streamlined, easy donation process.
yeah,
But I also think that there's a lot of benefits in terms of being able to test. I'm sure Fundraise has tested the donation flow
yeah.
to try to optimize that flow.
Yeah, but I hadn't thought about it in that regards, where like kind of the psychology of your gift. I mean, your gift being doubled by your company actually obliges you to complete it because there's more at stake at that point. That is a pretty fascinating point. As nonprofits are listening to this, whether they already have a strategy in place for company matching or they're just getting started, what's one thing that every nonprofit can do to really optimize this experience for their revenue?
I think a great starting point is to decide who at your organization is responsible for matching gifts and who's accountable for bringing in those dollars and raising those dollars. I think if you were to ask 100 organizations, 90 of them would say that there's not someone on their team who's responsible for growing their matching gift revenue. There may be someone responsible for processing it, recording it in the donor database, but not going after those dollars and raising it. And I think it's an opportunity for organizations of all sizes. One of the things that I love to see is K through 12 schools and who have a PTA or a PTO oftentimes have a matching gift coordinator or chair, a volunteer at the school whose job and kind of core responsibility for that year is bringing in as many matching gift dollars as possible. So I think
Yeah.
it's something that every organization could do. If you're small, either with a volunteer or with an intern. If you're larger, kind of just defining who at the organization kind of owns that matching gift revenue line item.
Do you guys have any research or any information around if organization, like let's say, average organization raises a few $1 million annually, at what point does it become a full-time job to have someone just managing matching?
Yeah, so I'll go back to kind of the LLS example. So when they
Yeah.
had it scattered across their 56 different chapters, and they also had someone in nationals, they had the equivalent of about 8 full-time employees focused on matching gifts.
Okay.
So it was 8 full, it's 20 hours here, 40 hours there, 10 hours
Yeah.
there, rolls up into 8. And that was bringing in about $3.5 million. When they went to centralize it, they were able to kind of bring that down to about 2.5 individuals, bringing in about $7.3 million. So a lot of it came from the centralization, putting someone in charge of it, them becoming more familiar with matching gifts, putting the strategy in place.
Got it.
So they're $100 million a year in individual fundraising.
Right.
So it is definitely kind of a part-time role for most small to mid-sized organizations, especially if you kind of focus your time on those $500 opportunities or the $1,000 opportunities.
Okay, that makes sense. Are there any industries in the nonprofit industry that aren't eligible to receive matching gifts? I'm thinking, religious organizations. Are there any sort of parameters that we should be thinking about here?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yes, each company defines their programs a little bit differently. They
Yeah.
kind of set their parameters on who they'll match to. What you see is nearly everyone matches to higher education. And then at least 2/3 of those companies match to pretty much all 501c3 organizations.
Okay.
Where the most common exclusion is houses of worship. So churches, synagogues, mosques, they're kind of rarely eligible. And political organizations are rarely eligible. On the religious side, if it's like a food bank or a homeless shelter associated with one, they're typically fall into the broader 501c3 category.
Okay, got it. So the thing that I'm thinking about on my mind is how do we close the gap on this 4 to 7 billion? As you think about your own roadmap as a company and where you guys are going, what are some of the priorities that you guys have that you're really excited about over the next 12 months or so that you're able to share?
Yeah, I think it comes to a couple things. Continuing to figure out how do you identify which donors are matching gift eligible. So, how can you pull in maybe an alternate data source? So, how can you pull in maybe an employer name from, say, LinkedIn? How can you pull it from, as someone's going through the donation process, if you have an employer record logged in the CRM, how can you automatically associate that?
Yeah.
And then how do you drive those matches to completion at a higher rate? So, how can you have better messaging out to donors? How can you make it easier for them? So, some of the things that we've actually tested that we haven't fully released yet is having a direct mail component within our 360 Match Pro platform. So that way, if someone gave offline, if you don't have their email address, you follow up with them offline. We're kicking around what would a text messaging option look like, depending upon how a donor gave. So continuing to tackle those two areas with kind of a focus on how do you get more and more data into our
Yeah.
platform.
Awesome. Well, Adam, I really appreciate the time to jump on with us and to share about the importance of this market. I'm really excited to continue to watch Double the Donation grow and continue to help nonprofits really accelerate their corporate match strategies. So thanks so much for joining the podcast and for being a partner with Fundraise.
Absolutely, Justin. Thank you.